This episode is brought to you by our Patreon supporters. Become a patron today at patreon.com/into the portal. Central Mexico. A place known for having a plethora of Mesoamerican cultural sites, attractions for the off-beaten path intrepid traveler, and of course, ancient ruins. It is a place that allows for a view of Mexico that is slightly less known to those used to frequenting coastal beaches and resort towns. However, the regions of central Mexico are also known for something that many of the locals in places like Monterrey and Mexico City have described as a very real, terrifying, nefarious phenomena that has existed for many, many years. Supernatural sightings of unexplainable humanoid figures that can only be described as witches. Re-sparked by 2006 video evidence, the conversation on Las Brujas, or the Witches of Mexico, has reached new heights. Paranormal ideas have experienced a renaissance in recent times that can only be described as a revival of interest in the unexplained, offering a new wave of legitimacy in Mesoamerican beliefs regarding the occult. Join us on Into the Portal for a new, terrifying experience in the world of Mexican witchcraft and sorcery, and one that will make you ask yourself the question, do you believe in magic?
Hello, and welcome back into the portal. I'm Amber A.
And I'm Andrew McKay. Welcome back, everyone.
We're back. It's a brand new week.
Oh,
I feel like we say that every single time.
I mean, it is indeed true every week when you say it's a brand new week, so.
Honestly, it's the most wonderful time of the year.
What, leading up to,
yeah.
Leading up to Halloween?
The big build-up, man.
Oh,
That's
yeah,
why we're so
yeah.
excited.
Absolutely.
Got some little bit of housekeeping.
A little bit, yeah.
We have a special someone we'd love to say happy birthday to.
Yes, we do.
Coming up on the 3rd here of October, Ian
Tarver.
Yeah.
Happy birthday, man. Happy early birthday.
Happy early birthday.
Yeah. So this was the closest episode to your birthday on the 3rd. So we, you had a special someone in your life reach out to us. And so we just wanted to say a very happy birthday to you, good sir.
Hope your day is excellent.
Indeed.
And as well, thank you for reaching out to us with that amazing article from Mysterious Universe.
Yes.
Very neat. Unexplained objects that have just been found all throughout the world that are just...
That is my jam. I can't wait to do an episode on that. It is going to be awesome.
Yeah, so that's definitely coming down the pipe pretty quick. Mm-hmm. Once we get our research done.
Well, yeah. We'll see how unscathed we are at the end of October. It's going to be a busy month.
Yep.
But we do have a couple of new reviews as well.
Sweet.
And last week we had a ton of housekeeping, so we didn't actually read out our reviews. But thank you so much to Haley's Comment 86 and the Pine Barrens Institute for your lovely reviews. Mm-hmm. And they have a couple new ones, and this one is hilarious.
It really is.
So this is from Rimquist, 5 stars, awesome podcast, and it reads, "This is a great podcast and super helpful for keeping my deformed twin brother calm in his basement cage. He no longer attacks me when my friends stare at his hump." So there's that. Thank you very much, Sarah. That's indeed creative. And then we have another 5-star one, which is awesome. Really just makes us feel so
very
good.
Sweet. Yeah.
This is really good. A is how it reads from, that's by. This is really good. A.
Yeah.
Really riveting research. It's a riot. These two delve into the mysteries of the world and do their best to place the truth of the matter. Not only this, with the addition of their own theories into the mix, this investigative podcast really gets you scratching your head and wondering if there's something more to this crazy universe than meets the eye, as if they were Agent Mulder and Scully themselves.
Aww.
That was like the best compliment I've ever got in my life.
Totally.
Not only this, but if you donate to them on Patreon, they treat their patrons right. I would definitely suggest adding this one to your list. This podcast is going places. Thank you so much. That's awesome.
That is
Really
so
appreciate
sweet.
it.
I can't even, yeah.
Yeah,
Aw.
and for the Patreon plug, that's friggin' awesome.
Yeah.
So yeah, go check us out on Patreon.
We try. You know, we got those new sort of swag going on there. We got some buttons.
I am so
and
excited
some new
for that
stickers
stuff.
on the way.
Yeah.
So,
Pumped.
yeah. I just got the, like, confirmation that it had shipped, like, yesterday. So
Oh, yeah.
it should be not too
Lots
long
of cool
now.
stuff coming.
Yeah.
And then, last but not least, we have this new idea.
Ooh, yeah.
A new idea for you guys.
We're not even really... It's kind of a half-baked idea at this point, but we're really stoked. We've been watching some crazy, like, awesome films related to the paranormal. We watched The Thing.
Yes.
We did a special little recording with Zang This podcast
Yeah.
in relation to that. So we're kind of thinking we might do, like, a sort of a Into the Portal film club.
Yeah,
kind of
we
thing.
want to put together, like we'll do not even like reviews, obviously. We just want to chat about really cool
Just
movies.
discussion.
Yeah, that are related to the genre. So like horror, sci-fi, paranormal, horror, sci-fi combos, which we love, which was like The Thing, which we just watched.
Oh, yeah, that was such a good...
really
and I
awesome
love
movie.
how we got to compare the 1982 to the 2011.
Totally.
I love that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so stay tuned for that on Zing This. That'll be coming out soon, so you guys can go check that out there.
Totally, yeah. But yeah, it's just kind of in the mix, hey?
Right.
We're gonna be sort of...
Because I know you guys all listening have all your favorite movies and all kinds of crazy stuff that you're into, so this will be perfect for those types of suggestions, and we'll watch it and we'll all come together and we'll have a forum or whatever, and we
Yeah.
thought it'd be really fun. So we might add an extra episode into the mix here.
Yeah, a little
Every
bonus
few
apps
weeks
here
or
and
something
there.
like that. Yeah. But anyway, let's jump into this topic because
Yup.
this is the preamble to October. Truly.
It is.
We are what are we discussing here today, Amber?
We're discussing the witches of Mexico. And I couldn't come up with a better name on top of my head.
Well,
Should we
because
call it
it
the
is-
Monterey Witch?
Well, that's just it. It's like we were thinking the Monterey Witch because it was kind of sparked by this initial
I
video.
keep thinking Monterey cheese.
But you know what? Why don't you just read this quote? Because I think that gives a good indication of why it's sort of a blanket term, witches of central Mexico.
Yes, exactly. So, yeah, this is a quote here from Santiago Uturia and Gabi Cifri, who have written extensively on the topic of witches and this sort of phenomena in Mexico.
Okay.
They say, alien phenomena and paranormal investigation in Mexico is currently in its prime. There is an awakening of consciousness and belief among Mexican people, media, and the government. We are establishing important precedents and unheard of advances in the study of these unexplainable incidents. End quote. So that's really interesting to me. I think that's jam-packed full of, like...
Yeah, that's ripe for discussion for sure.
It really is, because I feel like... I don't even know. I feel like we are kind of coming out of an age of sort of like mainstream skepticism, and we're sort of a little bit more ambiguous.
Yeah.
Just in a general sort of shift of like the cultural attitudes towards the paranormal and towards the unexplained.
Totally.
And even with this whole, like, you know, with what was it? The CIA that came out with like all those things just recently, like kind of like disclosure and all this kind of stuff of like studies of paranormal phenomena and all this kind of stuff. And they're not really like, you know what I mean? Like it's just kind of
there's an opening up in a sense, like and people
an
just
opening
being
up,
people being more open.
Yes.
And it is part of it is a cultural phenomenon in a way, but it is also
is.
because of things like this, like what we're going to discuss today, circumstances such as these.
Yeah,
and
stories,
really,
video evidence, like...
Right, that really keep this conversation going. And essentially the crux of this episode is the question, do witches really exist? And no, I do not mean the classic sort of wide brim hat, I'll catch you my pretty type witch.
Yeah.
Although that's...
The Wizard of Oz kind of stuff.
Right. I'm talking about entities that have existed since pre-Hispanic contact. So before the Catholic tradition could create an even more kind of feared and convoluted creature in Mexico, you know, that is, for all intents and purposes, very, very, very real because it's a phenomena that people are experiencing. And it's a phenomena that has been experienced and feared for literally thousands of years, going back to the ancient Aztecs and Mayas. And we'll discuss that in a little bit later, too. But it all kind of... Well, the thing is if you're in Mexico, maybe this discussion's been going on for much longer, obviously, but it kind of got revamped in 2006 from the report of basically a video that came in, and this got pumped out through the Mexican newspapers, but it was a video from the area of Monterrey. And, this was points to basically a resurgence in the belief in witchcraft and stuff like that. But should we go over that a little bit?
Let's dive into it. 'Cause
Okay.
this was juicy. And if you go on YouTube and look at the footage,
We've got it in our links, too. Like,
Yes.
we'll have it up on the website and our
do.
sources, obviously. And you guys can find it
so
there.
you'll be the judge of what you... Because, like, there are a lot of things that have been thrown around as far as what it could potentially be. But let's get into the story.
Okay, so the conversation was sparked again by this Central Eastern video from Central Eastern Mexico, dated May 17th, 2006. Okay, received by a Monterey television station. Super controversial recording, which was allegedly filmed near Cerro de la Silla, which I don't know exactly where that is.
De la Silla. Well, La Silla is window. I don't know what Cerro is. Is that like a canyon, do you think? Is that pointing to... It's not mountain, because that's montaña.
Right.
I wonder.
Going back to our
Spanish.
first couple of years of university Spanish. But essentially, this is what the video shows. It shows just a very bizarre, dark object that is humanoid in appearance, moving through the air at a considerable rate of speed in a strange crouch-like position. The object more or less flies in a direct line, and at first is sort of visible in the blue sky backdrop, but then it kind of drops below the skyline and is partially sort of obscured by the kind of poor quality of the film and then the mountains itself. So it's tough to kind of tell at first the distance, but as it continues on, you can tell that this object is at a great distance, and you're like, what is this thing?
It's moving at a considerable rate, too, and it's a very consistent rate.
Yes.
You don't see any dips or dives or any sort of bobbing or any sort of, like, turbulence, hey? Like, it's just,
Right.
like, it's on its track, which almost reminded me of, like, you know, like a clothesline, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's on, like, a track.
Like a zip line.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the movement itself isn't... It just seems too controlled. I guess you could perhaps have some sort of electronic controlling device that it could be propelled on.
Well, that's just it. This video is circulated for a long time now. So like 12 plus years, and it's been scrutinized by all kinds of different paranormal researchers, whether it's UFO researchers or just straight, you know, like ghost investigators and paranormal investigators and stuff like that. It's pretty divided. One of the ones that was interesting was MUFON weighed in, one of a spokesman from MUFON in Mexico, and essentially said that when speaking with experts, and I guess those would be weather experts, like meteorologists, that would essentially say that the wind speeds in that canyon are so high, especially at that time of year, apparently, that for an object to fly so steadily at that rate of speed that's not like on a zip line, like flying down the way, would be really hard.
Okay.
So
even like for like a drone like thing too, hey? Like
it would have to be like military grade drone.
Yeah.
Especially in 2006.
True, yeah. Because
Right.
like drone technology, like drones were so expensive in the early 2000s. They still are pretty expensive.
They still are
but
for
they're
ones
definitely
that
more
are
accessible now.
Absolutely.
But
Yeah. So they were looking at it from the perspective of like it is an unidentified aerial object.
Yeah.
And it's very, very...
It's so, like, the footage is very grainy. It's very hard to make out. Like, it does look humanoid,
Yeah,
like,
it does.
kind of, like, hunched.
Sitting on... I mean, a broom,
Is it
I
on the
guess.
broom? I don't know. It kind of does have that classic witch-like appearance. You don't see anything like broom-like extending out from the sides, though. And it's very interesting, too. Like, you described it as a dark object. Initially, it is dark, but then as it moves through the sky and, like, the scene and the frame, and it goes and dips into, like, the more mountainous, it's, like, kind of like a dry, deserty looking whatever,
Yeah.
it lightens significantly.
Yeah.
Which is strange, but I think that was just the way the natural light, probably the sun was coming from that direction.
Sure,
so
and
it
the
would've
distance
been...
from the camera and whatever, it could have been
That's
a lot
another
of
thing
things,
I was
but-
curious about with this, too. Like, what was the actual sort of estimated distance it traveled? I didn't really see anything any sources that came up with that. If anyone does know. Or
I mean, for sure, it traveled a significant distance. Like, it was a pretty long...
it's like, is it a craft? Is it a creature? That was kind of my main question,
right.
too.
So, exactly. That's kind of the MUFON involvement makes that question kind of more interesting for sure. But
was it military though? Like maybe.
But why? But what kind of a military object would be shaped like a hunched over humanoid figure on a frickin' stick?
But it's not on a stick, really.
No, but that's what people, when the video circulated, that's why people jumped on witch. because of its humanoid appearance, hunched over, cloaked, essentially. Like, the imagination can run wild with it, right?
Yeah.
Which is what makes this discussion in general so difficult. Real paranormal phenomena versus fear and paranoia.
Which is another weird thing.
Yes, it is.
Because a lot of the other accounts and eyewitness events that they all occur at night.
Yeah, especially this next one. And
Yes.
the reason that we started with the Monterey is because
It sparked the
2006,
conversation.
it kind of brought back up the stories that happened from a few years
And
prior.
people came forward with their stories
Yeah.
as a result of it, and just like, the increased media attention and all that.
So in North America, so like on north of the Mexican border, this next story really came like
Full force.
Full force.
Yeah. And this is interesting. We had a couple different reports that were quite thorough. I would say the one from Vice was quite good, as well as from Cryptopia, written by Rob Morphy.
Yes,
over
shout
there
out to
at,
Kryptonaut Podcast.
Yeah.
Sorry,
You
we
guys-
forgot your promo a couple weeks ago.
Oopsies. Our bad.
But yeah,
But there is, this one story that comes from Nuevo Leon, which is a province or like a state in Mexico, encompasses the Guadalupe municipality as well as the Monterey.
Yes.
So those are come up quite a bit as like hotspot areas, especially in the early 2000s. And so this account actually occurred in 2004, and it's basically been dubbed the Witch of Guadalupe, Nuevo Leon, like I said.
Right.
So it was a police officer, quite a young police officer, 21-year-old Officer Leonardo Samaniego.
Yep.
He was on duty. This was in the early hours of January 16th, 2004. And he was in his car and just kind of cruising along at a low rate of speed. He was in a sort of a neighborhood, like a residential neighborhood, very quiet, you know, like whatever, just not a lot going on. Okay, there was discrepancies though. Like the Vice article, I don't even know. Like maybe, well, no. Is Mexico City in Nuevo Leon too?
No, Mexico City is south. I mean, it's still
I feel like
central
it's-
Mexico, but it's probably, I mean, yeah, geographically, it's definitely going to be a good few hours away.
So a few discrepancies, but most of the sources were saying Nuevo Leon.
Okay.
Anyways, not get too caught up in that. But anyways, yeah, so it was around 3:15 a.m. Samaniego was making a turn onto Amaro Street in this neighborhood when he saw a dark object drop from a tree, not at a rapid rate, but almost floating erratically. The object hung in the air instead of landing on the ground. And when the officer shone his light on the figure, what he saw would scar him for the rest of his life. What he saw were two deep, sunken, black pits of eyes that glared back at him menacingly. It was a dark-skinned thing. It slowly turned its head. Just, can you imagine that?
Oh
Just,
my god.
Ugh. And it was framed by wads of frayed black hair. It had some sort of ragged black tunic, is how it was described, like some sort of cloak
Yeah, some sort of a,
that was draped over top of it. And actually, it's funny you said that in the very beginning, of, we're not talking the wide brim hat, but apparently this one did have some sort of dark, wide hat on it.
Or at least that's what it appeared like. Either from a hood or it was a dark object on the head.
Exactly. And it could have been a pointed hood or it could have been a hat, who knows.
Right.
But essentially, this thing, as soon as the lights came on it, it basically whirled on the officer as he was sitting in his cruiser.
So it attacked his car.
It did. It flew towards him at a rapid rate and violently started banging on the windshield of his car and trying to get into the vehicle.
Yikes.
Yeah.
So this is a quote here from
Cryptopia.
Samaniego, right?
Yeah.
Should I read it up?
Yes.
I saw her when she turned around. She was completely black. She was a completely black shape. She made a full turn, and the light in her eyes vanished. Her eyes were just black sockets without eyelids.
Freaky.
So that's a direct quote from the police. From
Samaniego.
Yeah, and oh my gosh.
So basically, this guy, he panicked, to say the least.
How else would you react in that situation?
I'd do exactly what he did. He floored the vehicle in reverse. And he was basically just out of his mind with fear. This horrible thing continued to attack the front of his vehicle, clawing furiously through the glass. Or trying to. He couldn't break through.
Trying to claw through the glass.
Yeah. Samaniego actually managed to get a call to dispatch. It was police officer Angelina Guerrero who actually received the dispatch.
Right, okay.
And he basically just he needed backup. His car had careened backwards down the street. He lost control, slammed into a wall. I'm assuming it was a concrete wall, not like a freaking fence.
Right.
Lost consciousness while he was still trying to protect himself from this hag-like entity that was clawing and gnashing vigorously at his, could you imagine that? It's, that's not a lot of space. You got one little, couple inches, and then there's the glass, and it's just glass.
Right.
Imagine if he hadn't locked his car.
Well, and it's, in his panic, didn't even think to, obviously you have some sort of a firearm on your hip. Doesn't even think to, grab that and shoot through the windshield. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
It's interesting, though. Apparently, he believes that he was protected because he had a Lady of Guadalupe, a icon of her, hanging in his rearview mirror. And it's interesting, yeah. Apparently, and according to some accounts, too, he got off to dispatch what he was experiencing. But then other accounts, I saw, when police showed up, it was described that they were basically looking for a delinquent of some sort, whoever was trying to, scare him or something.
Right. Actually, we actually didn't write that down here, but there was a small discrepancy between the dispatch and his story after the fact.
Yeah.
When he passed out, he thought he had passed out at a slightly different time, and I guess there was a small discrepancy in the described situation. But more or less, the point of the matter is that he was claimed to be attacked by a witch.
Yeah.
And he essentially, when backup arrived on the scene, they assumed that there was a delinquent involved that caused the surprise attack. But obviously, no one ever turned up. No hoaxers assumed responsibility. And if you were going to hoax, that's okay.
That's an elaborate hoax.
First of all, super elaborate. Also, super committed. It's 3 o'clock in the morning.
And it's a police officer.
And this is a cop. And it's a cop. I mean, it doesn't even matter where in the world, but it's if you're gonna, okay, that's you're asking to get shot. If you're right, are you not?
Yeah.
If you're pulling a prank like that.
I'm actually amazed he never actually opened fire. I guess he just didn't want to open
He was just too panicked, right?
Yeah.
Or that's a recipe for getting run over.
Oh yeah, true.
As a prank too.
Yeah.
You got to be absolutely out of your mind to pull that as a prank.
Yeah.
As a hoax.
And it's interesting because he did obviously describe it as a witch-like female entity of sorts.
Right.
And he was very open about it too. It's not like he had another, you know what I mean? That's all he had to say. And if you're gonna, and the other part of it too is say he accidentally fell asleep at the wheel and accidentally floored it in reverse and crashed his car, and then he woke up and he was like, oh shoot, basically not big mess up.
Right. But
you know what I mean? That's a pretty freaking elaborate story.
That's a super elaborate story. Also, the people arrived on scene. It wasn't even he reported it the next day. Samaniego was given both drug and psychological tests and assessments, both of which proved that he was of sound mind, right? So it's later, he would later surmise that that it was just because of Our Lady of Guadalupe that was why he was safe. But he was not drunk. He was not on drugs. And that was the official report from the police.
Yeah. So I want to believe his story. And the fact that he is a police officer, that does add some legitimacy, I would say. You do have some... You have your personal
really
reputation
young.
On the line.
He's really young, but
True.
You're putting your reputation on the line, for sure. And it's the details of it. So it's no eyelids. What's up with that?
Yeah, that's messed up, man.
You know what I mean? What?
How would you... are these added details later, perhaps? If you want to take the skeptical point of view that he was just trying to cover his ass and just didn't...
That's a terrible way to cover your ass.
It is. But at the same time, it's it's so outlandish that maybe it's just... I wonder what happened to him, if he was reprimanded at all or anything.
No, he wasn't.
And the thing is, too, he is not the only officer to come forward with a story.
No, he's not.
Mind you, there were other people, too, like that Norma Hernandez account, which was kind of brief, but essentially Cryptopia covered that, too, where she was just doing her laundry. This happened about a few weeks after the encounter with Samaniego.
Yeah,
Is it right?
Leonardo.
Samaniego. But yeah, Norma, she was doing laundry, hanging it up outside at night.
So this is, well, was it at night?
Yeah, it was.
Like in the evening, or like, it's not at 3 o'clock in the morning.
She saw a dark entity soaring above her in the night sky. It was a black form, as she described it. She ran inside, and her husband was inside watching TV or something, and he just like just scoffed at her. And then she went out again to check and see, but it was gone. She said it was about the size of a person. So that's kind of bizarre.
So again, a humanoid entity flying, very much like the 2006 video.
I wonder if it looked cloaked. Like, we didn't really get too much of a description.
Black form.
A black form,
you would think that would mean some sort of a cloak.
Soaring. Like, is it like a lumpy figure? Does it have wings? Is it, like, you know what I mean? Like,
and does soaring mean, like, straight line, like non-ballistic motion? Like, just kind of like the 2006 video where it is traveling almost along, like, what would look like a zip line, but it couldn't be because there's nothing it could be attached to, and also that would be so easy to figure out, obviously, right? Like,
it would become pretty obvious unless you, I don't even know. Like,
I mean, she said, quote, I mean, it was the size of a person, and that's what frightened me the most. Mm-hmm. Like, if it would have been smaller or bigger, that would be less frightening, but the fact that it looked like a human shape, and that is honestly, to me, like, in so much of all the things we cover, and especially when it comes to things like witches and entities like that, that is just they are the abject, right? Because it looks like a human for all, right?
But it's not.
But it isn't.
It's like a dark sort of demonic version.
Yeah. Oof. Shivers. Yeah. So, and then her sighting was corroborated by another neighbor named Ferrino Gutierrez. So this was a local resident who had seen similar flying entities in the neighborhood literally for years. So he's one of the people who can truly attest that central Mexico is a place where these beings, I don't even know, where they're just super common. That is a question I can't answer. Like, why is it only in, I mean, there's definitely towns and places that are known for, you know, witches and warlocks and making potions, and almost more of the shamanistic side of witchcraft. Not so much the straight, unexplainable, paranormal experiences. Yeah. Those seem to happen in these particular places in central Mexico. And that to me is just so absolutely bizarre.
I wonder how, like, the nucleus of this, how close it is to that zone of silence that is in Mexico that is also considered to be, like, a sort of, like, a hotspot as far as, like, anomalies related to technology. It has, like, a heightened sort of electromagnetic field that actually NASA discovered that it's a great place for shooting off rockets, apparently.
Crazy.
That. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Weird, hey?
That is weird.
Yeah. Anyway, side note. But I wouldn't, because, like, you could maybe perhaps explain some of this with perhaps maybe disruptions in the
like, if there's going to be some sort of, I don't even know, like, interdimensionality or something, that it might be more likely in a place where the energies of the earth are different. Is that what you're saying? Sort of?
Yeah, kind of like lane lines.
Am I boring you, Amber?
No, I'm sorry. I had a really late night.
You know what? We had a late night. And we
were Skyping.
And shout out to our buddy Wes in Australia, because we came home and we were. It was like 1:30 our time, and he's out in Australia, and he was waiting for his National Rugby League championship game to start. So we Facebook videoed with him for a bit. We're tired.
Facebook video. That's weird.
Facebook chat. We've never done that before.
No.
Weird. It actually worked pretty well.
It was pretty good quality.
But anyway.
But yeah, sorry. If I do yawn, it's not because, oh my gosh. It's not because of that. It's just because I haven't had enough coffee.
Más café. Más café.
Yes. Más café, please.
So, like you said before, though, Leonardo Samaniego wasn't the only police officer to experience this. And just like the Monterey video, there was another instance in 2006. So this actually came out a little later on. The actual story was released in the morning newspaper of Monterey, I believe.
Okay.
Yes, of Monterey.
Mañana.
So literally like the Monterey Daily newspaper or whatever.
Yeah, the Daily.
So September 19th, 2006, Gerardo Garza, a policeman from Santa Catarina, claimed to have seen 2 witches while on a routine patrol near a neighborhood cemetery in Monterey. So the police officer and his partner had a run-in with not one, but two. I can't believe it. Like, that seems so strange to me. I don't know. We'll talk about that in a second.
This is bizarre.
Not one, but two entities that have become synonymous with the region of Monterrey and central Mexico, as we've been talking about. And he really only could describe them as witches after the fact because of their humanoid appearance. So this guy had 5 years of seniority, and people were really surprised when he came forward with this story because of that. And, especially people in the police department. He put his reputation on the line, very much Leonardo did.
Yeah.
So, anyway, this is essentially how it went.
So crazy. Sorry.
No, go for it.
Just before we get into his account, it's just, like we started off, right? The resurgence of belief in authorities like the police, like the government.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of these investigations are government-sanctioned kind of things. Like...
Yeah. No, they are.
It's crazy. It's just
ubiquitous. And it's been that way
It's
for a
all
long
over.
time. And it still is.
Yeah.
It's played down now. Like, more so than it was in even the 1950s, 1960s, where witch hunts were still very much a thing.
Really?
Yes. Only in
like
certain
burning
places.
at the stake kind of stuff?
I don't know about burning at the stake, but we'll talk about that in a sec.
Wow.
Yeah.
Let's get into Garza's account.
Right. So Garza's run-in with these supernatural entities occurred near the Panteon Municipal Cemetery, a short distance from the road that's basically leading to Villa Garcia. So just a neighborhood.
Okay.
The officer was in the guardhouse. So car parked guardhouse would essentially be one of their spots
a
where
little
they
station.
I
Yeah.
picture it as like the security guard, little spots around town where they can stop in and.
Mexico is interesting for that. They have a lot of like roadside guard, like they're literally like on they'll have like little boxes. Almost looks like a little toll booth, except it's like boxes where they're stationed, like especially along highways and major roads and stuff.
Okay.
I remember when I was in Mexico, just like as a tourist and noticing quite a bit of that, and they carry big guns.
Oh, yeah.
Like big guns.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm amazed. Yeah, I don't know. We don't really hear any accounts of people being like shooting at these entities.
Yeah, which is like you could maybe use that as an argument that it's a hoax, or the opposite, that they're so petrified, like Samoniego's experience.
Yeah,
doesn't bust out the gun because he's just floors
you'd have to
it.
shoot through his windshield too. So that
do what you got to do.
That would be exposing you potentially as well. Like, what if bullets are meaningless? And then your windshield's broken.
Yeah.
And then what?
That's a big what if, I guess. I mean,
like, are there people out there that have just never come back? Like, is there missing persons files?
absolutely. I mean, if we dug deeper into this, and maybe we will, maybe we'll get people that reach out. If you are a listener from Mexico, or if you're super into witchcraft stories and you know of other things related to witchcraft and missing persons cases and stuff, please let us know.
Oh, we'd love to hear.
We'll definitely dig into that.
Yeah.
So anyway, the officer was in the guardhouse and he heard essentially the sound of rocks being thrown at the door or something similar to that. So he goes outside to see what's going on, what's causing the banging, and to his horror, he saw something completely unexpected. He comes around the corner to see two hag-like entities that seem to be women wearing dark cloaked hoods and or hats and basically cackling, making an almost screeching sound that he would later attribute to like a cackle. So we are kind of getting into the realm of wide brim hat, I'll catch you my pretty type witches.
A little bit.
But that is potentially the Catholic lens,
where's
right?
The boiling cauldron?
Well, but you know what? That's the European interpretation, Catholicism's demonic, like archetypal witch.
True.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
And so when that's the lens you have to look, because these devoted Catholics these guys are.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's what you see. That's what you end up seeing.
It's very,
I don't know.
The beliefs are very syncretic.
Right.
And incorporate, Mesoamerican tradition and the Judeo-Christian, as well as African traditions as well.
Right. This is what he had to say. This was a quote. They had red eyes, and they had what I thought were feathered wings and claws on the ends of those extremities. And obviously this is translated from Spanish.
Okay.
They began laughing horribly, screeching horribly, and I got back into the guardhouse, and when I saw through the people, it was terrifying. They were flying in circles. What? So I reported this situation to my fellow officers, and I put in quotes here below. Reported might be sort of a poor translation, because very soon after, the area was filled with police cars responding to his frantic calls. So I don't think it was so much hey guys, I saw you might want to pop down here. Yeah, I think it was a little bit more extreme than that. Anyway,
so they're flying in circles. What are they flying around? Like, they're just flying around the cemetery?
Obviously they were.
Red eyes.
My thinking of this is like, if you believe this to be a real sighting of something paranormal, it's at a cemetery. Clearly, ingredients are being harvested.
Oh, you think?
Or something like that. I mean, what else would you be at a cemetery for?
Well,
if
even
you're a witch.
performing some sort of ritual or ceremony. Of
right,
sorts.
but like a corpse is essential for whatever you're doing, obviously.
Maybe,
Well, you're not there for the frickin' McDonald's drive-thru.
Well, yeah. Or maybe it was like recently interred bodies that have become these demonic witch-like entities. Because that's something that's kind of... For me, like, there is a discrepancy between these accounts and then what we're going to get into with, like, warlocks and people that are self-proclaimed witches and practice witchcraft. Because these aren't people, like, that are claiming to be able to transform themselves. Like, you know what I mean?
Right.
Or maybe some of them, we just didn't hear those accounts. We didn't come across that.
Maybe.
But anyways, Gerardo, hey, he was having a real time.
He basically said after this that the witches flew off, but the officers that responded saw what he saw and can attest to the fact that quote, I didn't imagine anything. What I saw was real. I'd never been so scared before. So shortly after this, he was taken to hospital. His blood pressure was so low that they kept him there. He was in complete shock, and his entire state was documented by and corroborated by first responders who took him to the hospital.
So was he the only one to witness it, though?
Well, that's where it's like, we got this from a couple different sources. It's pretty, to be honest, it's a little sketchy.
Yeah.
We didn't get the account of his partner.
Oh.
Who he was supposedly on patrol with. But maybe that could have been incorrect from the account that I looked at. Maybe he was alone, similar to Samaniego, because he was on patrol by himself.
Yeah. The police officer and his partner, who is not even...
Unless what happened is, like, he's in the guardhouse, his partner's in the car, which is, like, not in view of what's happening.
Okay.
Right? I mean, that would be my only explanation for that. Like, he's in the guardhouse, hears something strange, goes out and looks, sees what he sees, runs back inside. His partner's still parked across the road or whatever. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But
yeah, that is a possibility.
That
but
is
again,
still very, very, very odd. And another cop, and just... Yeah, shortly after this, the video in Monterey.
Shortly, it was about 4 months after, because the video in Monterey was dated to, oh my gosh, May.
Right.
May 17th. What? Okay, so May 17th, 2006, sorry.
Right.
And then this is, the 19th, sorry. I thought it was going to be, so September 19th. I thought it was going to be another 17.
It's a few months later, yeah.
Okay. If it was the 17th, though, that'd be a weird, freaky
That would be a weird coincidence. So, what the heck are these guys seeing? Like, what is this? You know what I mean? And so I kind of dug up a couple of things on just witches of old world Mexico. Because it's like, to me, it's like, you know, are there just supernatural entities that have existed here for millions of years or hundreds of thousands of years, right? And this is just being interpreted in one particular way in these experiences. I don't know. But the concept of witchcraft and sorcery has been prevalent in Mesoamerica, existing way back to the formative Olmec years, and possibly even much earlier.
So the Olmec are the oldest known civilization in that area?
Yeah. Yeah, they predate the Maya and Aztec and all that stuff.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And, I mean, but these are, they're traced to those periods as well, the classical periods of the Maya and the late post-classic Central Mexican periods of those civilizations, right?
Okay.
But what I found was that there's a belief that stems from ancient Mesoamerica of, like, basically vampire witches. And they're not exactly the same as the interpretation that we're talking about so far, where it's like
maybe
demonic.
Though, like the Samaniego, like that definitely sounds like something that's trying to rip at him and get him.
Very much so.
Like obviously the one from 2006 was kind of different because he wasn't actually being attacked; he just witnessed it.
Right.
But this actually might fit with what you're about to dive into there.
Possibly. Actually, yeah, that's a good point. Maybe it
there's
does.
multiple things going on here.
Maybe. Freaky stuff.
Freaky.
Anyway, but like I said earlier, though, like the investigation into witchcraft has been going on for a long time in Central Mexico. In the early 1950s, government workers that were assigned to the Vital Records Department in the Central Mexican state of Tlaxcala, Is that how you pronounce that?
Yeah.
Close enough.
Sure.
They kept noticing a really strange phrase that was marked on the cause of death line on death certificates that were coming in. Mm-hmm. They kept noticing, and this was especially on infant deaths, but also on young adults as well. The insidious phrase was chupado por la bruja, or translation, sucked by the witch.
Sucked clean?
Was literally
Sucked
what
dry?
people were writing on death certificates for their loved ones. Okay? So this find ended up resulting in an investigation into rural areas by the state authorities because this was so messed up. The issue was becoming so extreme. It eventually led to a law being passed in 1954 by the state legislature requiring municipal authorities to report these causes that were marked by sucked by the witch to medical authorities for further investigation because they
That's
were so
interesting.
concerned with what was going on.
I have a sort of reply to that,
Okay.
or a hypothesis. Sucked by the bruja. Okay, so we're getting into this a little bit more, but a lot of traditional Mesoamerican ideas associated with witchcraft and sorcery involve transformation into animalistic entities or beings.
Right.
Can incorporate multiple animals, can be half human, half animal, all this kind of stuff. So transformation, big trope. But what if these people were actually, like they said, being sucked by the witch? So they're being like sucked by something. What if it's actually vampire bats? And because, like, if you think about it, they could think that the witch has transformed into a bat and is sucking them. And then as a result, perhaps these people are contracting rabies or other venereal diseases from these creatures. And then as a result, dying. Especially
Like in
infants and
ancient, like in
children.
old time, like that would be the
Yeah.
folklore tale of
Yeah.
it.
The,
But it's
bat,
like-
the witch transformed into a bat and sucked on my blood while I was sleeping, and then you wake up and you've got these markings
That
on
would
you.
make sense for the infant deaths because, like, I remember watching a documentary way back in the day on.
So it's not like you're sucked dry. But
No,
you're just,
totally.
yeah.
But in terms of vampire bats, though, I remember going to the library with my mom, public library, when I was a little kid, and renting this VHS on monsters. And one of the parts of it was on vampires, and I always remember them talking about vampire bats and like the stigma around them,
Yeah.
and how like the way that they get their blood is essentially like way less invasive than like a mosquito. Even they give you a little. They'll land on like the back of a horse or something and give them like a tiny little nip that they don't even feel, and then they're just like chilling there and lick it up. So they just kind of like lap it up. It's not so much like sucking the blood, but I picture that for if you have like a sick infant or younger kids, especially in old
More
world Mexico,
vulnerable,
vulnerable people. I could see that.
Yeah.
I could see that definitely becoming a folklore tale.
That just popped in my head because I was just reading about that and the whole idea of animal transformation and
Totally.
associated. But anyways, that's just a possible explanation.
No, I love that because it is linked to animal transformation. Anyway, so just for geographic reference, Tlaxcala is a small state in central Mexico, so this is just east of Mexico City. And this was the site of a pre-conquest kingdom called like Tlaxcala. So this is part of the Aztec and incorporated into the Aztec Empire. So this is where the origin of this vampire witch originates.
Okay.
And it's basically called, I am going to butcher this, but it's kind of a tough word to pronounce.
Tlahuelpuchi.
Tlahuelpuchi.
Pookie.
I'm just going to call it vampire witch.
Okay, please.
But the story goes, the legends go, that people can be born these vampire witches, or you can become one later on. Almost in the sense that, like, similar to a Wendigo, kind of, in a way. Like, you can become
Or
one.
a skinwalker.
Or a
in the Navajo
skinwalker.
tradition.
Very much so. And which are witches, for all intents and purposes.
They're definitely equated a lot of the times with sorcery, witchcraft, and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Right.
But a very direct consequence of something like committing murder or whatever.
Right.
Or if you're Wendigo, consuming human flesh.
Right. Ooh. Anyway, so you remain that way until you're dead. There's neither a god nor devil can erase what
So
has
you're
been done to you.
born like that. Can you be made into it, though?
Yeah, like if you're bitten, I suppose this is where the story changes, right? So it's like this is where the European tropes kind of take over, and it's
Okay.
hard to distinguish. I don't know.
Yeah.
The point is that this ancient vampire witch was pre-Hispanic, and it needed human blood to survive. More specifically, the blood of infants is what it desired most. So one of the main powers of these vampire witches is their ability to shapeshift, just like you were just talking about, changing into a variety of different creatures to fit whatever situation they're in. So yeah, very much like the skinwalker.
Yup.
So they can be killed, but it's a very complicated thing, and this is where the incorporation of European beliefs has been brought in. The wooden stake, the cross are now the weapons of choice. Okay. If you would have looked a few thousand years back, that would not have been the case.
Right. They would have had their own symbology.
Right. They would have had to conjure their own positive entities to whatever, to fight it off or something.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So... But much like the Europeans and even the early American colonists, obviously, they were killing mostly women, some men for this. There was massive witch hunts in central Mexico, and people were being executed and prosecuted for this all the way up into the 1970s. The last known execution of a vampire witch was in 1973. That is not that long ago.
What? That's kind of crazy.
Yes, it is. This is with real authority. This is with the state authorities involved.
State authorities. Okay, that's where we're getting government sanction.
Concerning.
And that is actually, and you can interpret that in so many different ways, right? As far as the dominance of women being targeted too, that sort of gender politics in a certain regard.
Very true.
But, it's interesting because in sort of traditional Mesoamerican cultures, it was more of a matriarchy type of organization of society. Yep. So women had a lot more power, they had a lot more agency. So maybe I don't even know. You always get into sort of
I feel like this is
relations between genders, that type of
totally.
stuff. You never know.
I feel like this is just out of pure fear, though. Very much the same fear that people would have been feeling in those early Puritan colonists, right?
But why are they so fearful? What is the cause of that fear? Is it the power of the individual to sort of
No, it's people physically disappearing or children being what they believe to be being killed by a legitimate vampire witch. The question to me is if it's got to be a mix. It's always a mix in situations like this of legitimate paranormal entities or legitimate paranormal experiences and what you're talking about, historical
people sort of jumping on a bandwagon, targeting people that don't necessarily need to be targeted or whatever.
Right. But my question with the Thylapuchi. Is this ancient vampire witch at all linked to these modern sightings?
I honestly think that one, the one that I mentioned, the Samaniego, that could quite possibly be a modern encounter with one of these things. Very
much so. The other thing we didn't mention about his experience was that at the exact same time, there was a ritual cleansing taking place because of a young woman, I believe, that was being stalked and harassed by a witch.
And her grandma or something decided to do this ritual, this ceremony.
It was essentially
did anything really happen though in the ceremony? Did they witness anything that was unusual or any sort of demonic entity that sort of entered
I can't remember. They definitely touched on that on the Flying Fiends of Mexico episode of Kryptonaut podcast.
Right.
They briefly mentioned that. Mm-hmm. I'll have to you guys should go check that episode out too. It's really good.
Flying Fiends. That sounds like an episode of Scooby-Doo in totally the best way possible.
It does.
I love it.
Love it.
Anyways,
but
that is.
But the black magic element of that makes me think about this, right? Because are these entities at all linked to that? Could these things be conjured by what is interpreted now as modern black magic that has a Catholic overtones? You know what I mean?
Yeah. So it's hard to now separate the sort of melding of all these traditions, the Judeo-Christian, the syncretism of all these belief systems, right? Yeah. And it's funny because when you start to look into the culture of witchcraft and sorcery in Mexico, you're looking at less of a traditional Mesoamerican conception and more so a syncretic sort of voodoo-esque kind of witchery.
Voodoo, witchcraft.
Santeria, exactly. And so a lot of what we uncovered about this culture was very reminiscent of the voodoo episode we covered, right? Mysteries of Voodoo, uncovering, kind of unmasking the whatever sort of common misconceptions of all that.
Yeah.
And so you do get this concept of the bruja that is, in practice, very closely associated with African traditions of voodoo and traditional Mesoamerican. But things like the ceremonies, man, all the weird stuff they use, all the ingredients. There was one account I read about a guy who basically came to this guy who is a warlock, a self-proclaimed warlock, and he was asking for a ritual cleansing, which is the most common form of magic practice by these brujas, witches, is the Spanish word. Or Spanish, Bruja?
Yeah.
Spanish, yeah. Sorry. But, yeah, so basically what he did was this warlock, he performed a ceremony where he would basically, like, rubbed eggs all over the man. He, like, he was sitting on a 6-pointed star with, like, a picture of the St. Andrews, and then, I think it was the Virgin Mary on the other side or something like that. And just very reminiscent of the traditions we saw coming, like, you know, like, from New Orleans, like, in the south of the U.S. and across the Caribbean, all that kind of stuff. But it's very interesting. So there is a central sort of city called Catemaco, which is basically the hotspot for magic. And there's this one mountain in particular. It's called Mono Blanco Mountain, and it's said to emit a kind of energy. So basically, Catemaco has become the hub of witchery and magic. There is a festival that occurs once a year. I think it's the first Friday of every March. And it's known as the International Congress of Witches. Cool. Which is very interesting. So there's a lot of stuff going on there. Lots of vendors, too. So it's been highly commercialized and all that. Right. But there are tons of warlocks and witches there. Some of them are obviously kind of more hoaxers. Some of them are a little bit more legitimate in the eyes of the people there. Right. But they perform healing ceremonies. They concoct juju cures for illnesses, maladies, spiritual cleansings, all this kind of stuff. Very cool. There was this one account from a girl who went to see, it was that same warlock that I just mentioned in the previous story. Yeah. But she basically said that her boyfriend of 5 years had run off with some other woman, and she wanted him back because she wanted revenge and she wanted to control him. So it's very voodoo-esque, right? Very like trying to sort of send out a curse to kind of, sort of contract the sort of human behavior you want to see or whatever. Yeah. And of course, a lot of this, like, there's so many people that'll take advantage of these beliefs and stuff and basically tell people that they have a hex on them or they have a curse, and then they need to pay them an obscene amount of money in order to remove this thing. But anyway, sorry, that's kind of like a lot of that culture is seen, and there's people around, like, basically, like, there was this one reverend that I saw interviewed, and he was basically saying that, right? Like, it's just a bunch of tricksters and whatever, just trying to, like, take advantage of people's superstitions. But there is some people that definitely add legitimacy and do still, like, believe this to their core. Absolutely. And so a lot of these people will participate in this very interesting ceremony, and it kicks off the International Congress of Witches. It's known as Black Mass, and everyone gathers in the dark by this cave where the devil is known to visit. I'm assuming this cave is on the Mono Blanco Mountain that sort of overlooks the whole city. Okay. And so, it starts with a ceremonial burning of a 6-pointed star at the mouth of the cave. And it's part of a sort of a ritualistic cleansing of auras. So that's kind of cool. I thought, it's to ward off evil, not to sort of bring it in. Mm-hmm. So we will get into the whole, there's white magic and black magic. Exactly. And this is, the interesting thing about this part of the discussion, too, is, like, these are real people practicing magic. Practicing witchcraft. And so, like, to me, when we're trying to figure out, like, what the heck these things were that, say, the police officers saw, like, for example, there's the distinction for me between, like, there's in my mind, there's 3 sort of versions. I guess I should save this for the theories, but it's like, is it potentially witches that are very much people who have mastered black magic and have it in their blood, so to speak, and their traditions are passed down from their relatives and their family? There's that. Then there's purely supernatural demonic entities manifesting as humanoid, whatever. Just like spiritual forces in the world. Because we see the abject, like, that's what we see, because that's our human lens, is to see that as a demonic entity. So there's that, pure supernatural. Or people that are cursed, which is supernatural as well, but are these witches people who have been hexed or have been condemned? Or what I'm kind of seeing more so is sort of a bipolar split between, like we said, like, so there's people that do practice magic, there's people that practice white magic, sort of like what you would deem as, like, good magic, like curing, like shamanism, exactly, and then there's the bad black sort of sorcerers that sort of maybe through these types of rituals and ceremonies, they bring about these demonic sorts of things. They can facilitate the crossing over or whatever. Exactly. So what these people have seen in the video and in other accounts, like eyewitness accounts, like those two officers, I feel like maybe they're seeing the manifestation of evil. They're not seeing a witch per se, you know what I mean? They're seeing maybe the spiritual manifestation, if that makes sense.
So it's metaphysical is what you're saying.
I would say so.
Rather than... Like, it's
like,
metaphysical
physical
entity, but with a
thing.
physical experience.
Yeah.
Right? Which is a tough kind of thing to wrap your head around in a way.
Yeah.
Right?
It's so interesting, though, because, like, it's very... Okay. So this guy, there was this one NY Times article that I read, and just to sort of bring back to, like, yeah, the idea of, like, how would you kill a man? How would you bring about this black magic? What are the sort of ritual objects used? And according to this one guy who's a self-proclaimed warlock, the same guy I was talking about earlier, his name's Alejandro Galejos Garcia.
Okay.
And he explains that you can kill a man quite simply with magic. And all you need is a black cloth doll, some thread, a human bone, and a toad. And you must ask the devil's permission in person at the cave in the hills where he's said to appear. So that same cave in Catemaco.
Right.
And
so you have to ask the devil. That's purely Catholic, obviously.
Exactly, yeah. So
that's 100% not...
So that's where the syncretism comes in, right? And then, okay, so he says here... Yeah, so you have the doll, you lash the bone to the doll, you shove it down the toad's throat, sew it up with the thread, and then you take it to a graveyard and recite the proper words, and then you'll curse someone to death.
Right.
So maybe that's what's his name was seeing in 2006 in the graveyard. He was seeing
somebody
some sort of
that actually
ceremony.
Makes sense.
It's so crazy because like there's so many things that we would associate with more traditional European witchery and witchcraft and stuff.
Right.
Things like using all sorts of like weird oils extracted from like different creatures, rattlesnakes, lizards, turtles, dried tongues of chickens, coyotes, fish, all this weird stuff. But very similar to like what we saw with voodoo and magic there.
Yeah.
I love all of this. Like it's all so weirdly blended together, but gross and like just like not gross as in like, you know, but like very.
No, but it is though. It's very much like
gritty and like it reminds me of The Witch, right? Like the movie The Witch, where this was it was Puritan, like New England era setting, all that. So not even remotely related to anything to do with Mesoamerican culture.
No.
Still witchery though.
Yeah.
And like the types of like gross, like, you know, like it's just like gory and just like really primordial.
Primordial.
Like, what's the word
yes,
I'm looking
that
for?
is
Like,
the
it's
word
just,
because there's always a need
blood,
for there's always a need for fluid. Right?
Yeah, and getting dirty.
Like
you're just like, you're covered in all this stuff and like,
and
they rub stuff all over you when you participate in these ceremonies and stuff.
Right.
It's very...
And it brings up the question that we've touched on a lot, which is like, to what extent does like the belief actually manifest a physical reaction, something real?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Because like even going back to that one man I mentioned that he went to that guy, the warlock, to get a ritual cleansing, and he had all this stuff like rubbed all over him, and he was saying like how he was experiencing inside all these like this tension and all this like weird sort of like uncomfortable like feelings, and then closer to the end he just started to feel really light and really just better, just cleansed, which is weird, right? So like all this weird stuff that's happening to him physically is sort of manifesting spiritually as well on the inside.
Right.
Is that a really weird way of saying all that? That was like overly complicated.
Oh, maybe.
I'm just like talking through this out loud.
That's all right.
But
I guess we're sort of migrating towards our discussion and theories section here.
Yeah. Very true.
And you have some interesting stuff on sort of like pre-Hispanic Mexican magic.
Well, I came across this one person named Jeremy Coltman. He's currently working on a doctorate in anthropology at the University of California.
Okay.
So he's studied this topic quite a bit, very extensively. And so more so pertaining to ancient Mesoamerican cultures.
Okay.
But no, yeah, he basically says, this is a quote from him, he says, notions of witchcraft and sorcery are considerably ancient in Mesoamerica, so just like you said earlier, hey? And it extends back to the formative Olmec and most likely even earlier. Such notions, however, are more identifiable among classic Maya and late post-classic central Mexico. So, yeah, Maya, Aztec, that type of thing. But it's very interesting because there is, again, going back to this whole animalistic sort of side of stuff, there's this concept of the wahi, and this is sort of a classic Mayan magical concept that's basically, it's more spiritual and less sort of like witchery or anything like that, but essentially they're these spirits. They're depicted all over the place. So they're on walls, on vases, like vessels, all sorts of things.
Yeah.
And they're these spiritual sort of weird things that basically can take several forms. Like they can be a bat, a monkey, canine, jaguar, but it's kind of just known to represent like companion spirits or coessences of people.
Ooh.
So maybe in a sense, like if you do undertake some sort of transformation related to this, like I don't even know, like maybe the type of creature you turn into determines whether you're like
maybe
more on the good or evil side, or how does this even happen?
See, but that's profiling animals though too.
Let's not get
that reminds me back that's a throwback to another Zing this collab we did where you got the rat as your Patronus from the Harry Potter episode, and you were just like so choked. But it's like, you know what? Rats are great. They're resourceful. I mean, they're not great. They spread disease. But they are, but they're respectful. I mean, or I can respect them. Is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, they're respectful.
They're so respectful and polite.
But anyways, yeah, so that was just one sort of ancient magical concept that we see remnants of today that have sort of been, I don't even know if I want to say like they've been sort of antiquitized, like they're not really like relevant anymore in today's sort of culture, Mesoamerican culture. But there was another sort of like interesting tidbit. These are all just little tidbits. They're not directly, but they are related to magic in pre-Hispanic Mexico.
Yeah, exactly.
And that was the idea of like decapitation being associated with ritual magic in more so Mayan culture.
Yeah.
And to just like go back to the wahi, many of these are depicted near head racks. The wahi, like the spiritual animal type things.
Right.
And they hold decapitated human heads. But it's interesting because heads in Mayan culture are representative of personhood, so kind of like the soul of the person. So it's almost like they've captured the soul. I
see.
And
that makes sense.
Yeah, it's almost like a trophy in a certain... But anyways, Coltman says here, he says, in Costa Rica specifically, so this is a little bit further down south, trophy heads may have been both perpetrators and objects involved with sorcery, while among the... Oh, sorry, he goes to Ecuador too. Among the Jivaro of Ecuador, heads are taken as a direct response to witchcraft and sorcery. So I'm not sure if he means that the head would belong to the individual that is a witch, and it's kind of like the... You know what I mean? The...
like the removal... the... getting rid of the witch.
Yeah, that's like the way to cleanse it.
Right. It doesn't seem like...
Or defeat it.
Just straight decapitating it.
I feel like we should draw upon Hugo de Burgos for this, one of our favorite...
We may have to...
Favorite. Say favorite.
Hey, he is famous. He's our favorite, and he's famous.
And he's our favorite.
Yeah. He's also... our old anthropology professor we had from UBC. We should definitely bring him on, maybe for a bonus episode.
Oh, that'd be so much fun.
Because he specializes in Mesoamerican, ancient Mesoamerican cultures and shamanism and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, very, very cool.
Dang, we should reach out to him.
Well, but speaking of people in anthropology, I had an interesting story from Dr. Zabaleta. It was the name of this guy. I can't remember his first name. I want to say Henry. I don't know if that's correct, actually.
Henry?
This was from a National Geographic video. We'll have the link for it, so you guys can go check it out yourselves as well. It's just a short little bit on Mexican witchcraft in general, modern day. But... he had a really interesting experience because he basically started off as he was in central Mexico researching witchcraft, researching the people, going through the markets, looking at the differences between like old world witchcraft and the now modern interpretation, and things like you were talking about, like people trying to scam people and stuff like that, right? Like the cultural aspect of it. But what he kind of ended up...
Selling juju from China.
Yeah, exactly, right? So he had done over 30 years of field research on this subject, and he had visited markets, back corners of the world of witchcraft, and all over Mexico.
Cool.
But basically, his story goes that he came upon, when he was with a research group, he came upon a site of ritual black magic.
What?
And he knows this because they basically came upon... It was like... in a cave. It was they were directed to this spot as a potential site where black magic takes place. So out of their research curiosity,
would
they
it be
go
the
there,
cave
right?
of Catemaco?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
But something very similar to that. They came across hundreds of objects buried as a part of a hexing ritual. Evil black magic. So these were literally people who had been captured in the objects and held in the items that were placed in these jars so that they could be hexed, along with organs of animals, blood,
So
among
just,
all
like,
the other things that
magical objects
we've talked about
yeah.
already. So basically, he was with a group of part of the people with his small group were healers to help him with his like interpretations of stuff, right?
Yeah.
And he himself was in the process of becoming a healer.
Okay.
Because he was really becoming
just immersed in it.
Yeah, he was really immersed in the culture. They felt bad for like the people who had been cursed, essentially. So the healers that he was with decided to try to break the spells by essentially removing them from where they had been placed in the ground of this cave.
What?
But they went too far. That was a mistake. And people who practice black magic will tell you that you should not touch or mess with hexed objects because you very well could become that way yourself.
Yeah.
And that is essentially what happened.
How many movies start off that way?
He truly believes that this happened to him. So shortly after this, after he was a part of it, he was touching and moving these objects and helping them as well.
Yeah.
Shortly after this, he went from being in perfect health to having an awful debilitating illness, pain all over his body, had to go to the hospital, became just severely physically ill. He ended up surviving, but he essentially, like, he had to go through, he went and had what was called a limpia, a sweeping of evil.
Yeah, a cleansing.
So, cleansing. We've already talked
Limpiar
about.
means to clean.
Right. Get a broom, sweep it off. But, so he had a cleansing, but in the end, he was basically, like, just torn. He was not sure whether his experience was purely psychological or if it was something more. In the end, he believed that there was some sort of black magic. There was some sort of supernatural power that wasn't affecting him. It was too coincidental for it to not be for him.
Yeah.
To come down with an illness that quickly.
That's interesting. Well, that it comes down to the belief versus, like, belief manifesting or...
Yeah.
Like, if he had gone into that... Imagine if you were not him, like, some Joe Blow that just stumbles across this cave and whatever. This is classic, like, beginning of any horror movie, whatever.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, this is a freaky cave with, like, a 6-pointed star and whatever else and some weird, freaky objects.
Yeah.
And let's move this stuff around. I wonder if they would, like, you know what I mean? Like, if they would end up contracting the same kind of illness or not, kind of thing. That's where...
Right. That's where I'm always saying, like, being oblivious is the best weapon in paranormal situations.
Except
you
for the thing. I don't think you want to be very oblivious when the thing's around.
Only Mr. Magoo would get away with that.
How many feelings do you have?
Like, the thing would be... Help him out, I'll show you. But to me, like, this experience of Dr. Zabaleta is potential evidence, like, from a credible academic-minded source that black magic is a way of inflicting real effects on somebody. And it's the methodology used, like, is a way of connecting to an otherworldly power. And that otherworldly power could be what those police officers saw. Could be what Samaniego saw. Just it happened to be in a... But this is why the church forbids witchcraft, right? Because they're terrified of it. Because they attribute it to the devil.
They actually forbid it?
But yes, of course. Of course. What do you think? The church says only on weekends? No, it's forbidden. They won't even let people... Yes.
Pope?
Yes.
It's a papal bull?
They won't even let people watch freaking Harry Potter.
What?
Literally.
No.
When I was in elementary school, we were not allowed to watch Harry Potter at school because there were Catholics in the class. Their parents refused to let them watch Harry Potter.
I feel like that's like a different...
That was a little extreme.
Yeah.
But it's witchcraft. And right?
Yeah.
Anyway, that's going a little far.
Bizarre.
But is it though? Does that surprise you?
I guess maybe not. Like, I don't know. I never really thought about it.
Yeah.
That's
But
harsh,
my point here though is, like, perhaps the church isn't entirely wrong. It's just that they're attributing it to the devil, heaven and hell, right? The demons and the things associated with the church. This is just the European interpretation, blanketing over ancient Mesoamerican paranormal entities with European witchcraft experiences.
Yeah, that's true. You do get that layering, like we've been bringing out throughout this whole episode. It's very and that's interesting that you bring up this concept of good and evil related to European Judeo-Christian traditions and all that stuff, and Catholicism and stuff, because in Mesoamerican traditions it's a little bit different. So they don't really focus on concepts like in traditional Mesoamerican cultures and mythos, that type of thing. They don't focus on sort of a bipartisan split between good and evil, they focus on more concepts of order and chaos.
Right.
So there is this one god that's associated. I don't even really want to go into his, like, try and say his name. Oh, he was known as the Arch Sorcerer. I'll just say that.
Okay.
Tezcatlipoca, Lord of the Smoking Mirror, was another name for him.
Cool.
But essentially, he was associated with like disorder, essentially. Things like he could bring about disease, famine, plague, but he was also prayed to in order to avoid these sorts of calamities. So in order to maintain the order and to appease his sort of spirit, that type of thing.
Yeah.
But he was also seen as benevolent, caring, but could be dangerous and destructive. So those sorts of ideas where it's like you need to keep the order in order to keep the peace, in order to like maintain things and avoid certain things.
Well, it's like that god in and of himself is like white and black magic, right?
Yeah.
It can be for good or bad.
Exactly, and that's kind of where magic in itself, right, is both things.
Right.
But it's and he's also associated with winds. So if you think about it, wind is often a disrupting factor.
Right.
So if you think, like especially winds of the night. So again, you get the sort of I thought that was really cool. I didn't look too bad into it, but he's also associated with what they call malos aires, so bad winds.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Just like a blowing through of evil potentially.
Exactly.
It
sounds
so cool.
Like the idea that, so this is again from that Coltman guy who was studying to get his doctorate, and he was just talking about how ancient and contemporary Mesoamerica, the daily struggle is not based on Judeo-Christian concepts of good and evil, but instead one of order and chaos. And he says here, quote, "Life is about maintaining balance, order, and equilibrium. There are forces that threaten this balance and order." So that's kind of the maintenance that you need to sort of do. And so maybe these sort of shamans or these warlocks and witches, like a lot of them are sort of programmed to sort of maintain that equilibrium. But then there's others that perhaps aren't and are a little more nefarious in their practices. Especially like you could get clientele, right? They're asking you to do the sorts of magic. And if you have that kind of background or whatever and the knowledge and the authority in your community, and these people have these types of beliefs, then I don't know. Yeah. Like the whole thing. I love this though. I want to go to Mexico and try and experience this, and not in the commercialized, sort of like, oh yeah, come to Catemaco, the international whatever of witches, and buy her, like I said before, the made in China, cures for whatever, No. But I would really love to be witness to a ceremony.
That would be really cool.
Or go to that black mass. That would be very interesting.
Definitely. I wouldn't want to hang around a cemetery and come across a couple of hag-like entities, per se.
No.
But
no.
Okay. I mean, we're coming down to the end here, I suppose.
Oh my gosh, sorry guys. I'm just
hung over Amber and the yawns today.
I know. I'm sorry. I feel bad. I feel like I might have been stumbling over a little bit.
That's okay.
But it's all good. You guys, you get it, right?
Jesus. All right. Well, let's hear your final take. I want to get your opinion, especially on the main story, like Samanyego's story, Leonardo. What do you think ultimately he saw there?
I am of the mind that I think it could have been like what you were talking about with those vampire witches, that sort of manifestation. I also think perhaps maybe he had some bad juju put on him, and or he was just in the wrong spot at the wrong time, and he just happened to witness that demonic thing that was fleeing or being cleansed from the other ceremony that was taking place nearby.
Right.
But I don't not believe him, though. I don't think it's a simple case of, oh, he accidentally fell asleep at the wheel, crashed his car, and is trying to come up with an elaborate story to cover his ass.
No.
I don't buy that.
No, I don't. I agree. I would agree with you.
So what would you say? Are you leaning towards the same?
Well, I actually really like what you just said there, that it could be the fact that there was a cleansing going on at the same time. Maybe that he was in the area, wrong place, wrong time in a sense, and this was the entity, being shooed away, right?
Yes, and maybe it was trying to cling on to him too. And the fact that he had that Lady of Guadalupe icon hanging,
him, maybe
it did. But then you have to wonder, where the heck did it go?
Back into another dimension or just off into the night. I don't really know. The thing, because Okay.
Or just off into some other
That's a
areas?
really good question. Yeah, like where did it go? That comes back to the thing.
Was there any physiological evidence?
Yeah, is it metaphysical or is it physical? Like you brought up the movie The Witch, which we love, and we'll probably cover that for our first Into the Portal film thing because it's just
real
awesome.
time.
But yeah, I love that name. But in that movie, The Witch, not that you really see it because it's all suggestive, but it is a physical creature living in the woods. Mm-hmm. So,
but metaphysical too. Like the very end scene of that was very
flying in the air, like whatever. No spoilers, obviously. That came out a few years ago, so whatever. You guys should go watch it, but
and discuss it with us.
But still different, like not interdimensional though. No. You know what I mean? Like so where the heck did this thing go? That
I don't know. I'm just thinking,
clawing at his windshield and then just flew off into the night.
I'm thinking it's just part of the realm of disorder, and it like I said, the Malos Aries, the bad winds, and maybe it is hiding out in a cave somewhere, or maybe it's just like manifested. Maybe it's within someone else. Maybe a warlock or a shaman or something could have been like, you know, like almost like possessed by it. That's one thing that we didn't really see, like people being like possessed, like
right,
because that is a very common thing with obviously with the Catholic tradition.
Yeah, like a demon possession and things like that.
It's a little bit different, this concept.
Do you think that the experiences of the two police officers is at all linked to the object that was filmed in Monterey? Is that the same entity? Like, is that the witch that attacked Samaniego?
And it lives in that canyon, maybe? And I don't know. There's so many other dots to connect, like, even as far as the geography and, like, the distances between these places, like... Right. We need to plot it out, man.
I know. I feel like I just have a million questions for you here at the end, too, but it's like, okay, to you, is it more scary for there to be one monstrous, like, demonic witch entity living in the mountains nearby, or for it to just be a phenomena and it's not necessarily one entity or one evil thing? It's, like, potentially just how you see supernatural stuff happening, right? Like it just happens, you know what I mean? Like it's not the same actual physical one creature being seen by both
like
police officers
that kind of like coalesce and manifest in certain
like what to you, like to me there being one,
or like, perhaps there is one sort of high sorcerer or whatever, high witch, and then it sends out these sort of manifestations and stuff, and perhaps what you're seeing is actually not, like, it's like projection of some sort as a result of some sort of ritual magic or some sort of black magic ceremony or something.
Man, I'm always just so, it's tough. It's tough to interpret. Yeah. I definitely don't think either of those situations were hoaxes. No. And I don't think the Monterey video is a hoax either. I think it could be a misinterpretation of something. I do not have an explanation of what that would be. It's not a drone.
Unless it's some sort of military technology that was just seen and shouldn't have been seen. But even that is like, it's such a bizarre, clunky looking object.
It's such a stupid shape.
Yeah.
Why would you design something that has that's not aerodynamic at all, that's super bulky and obvious? Like, that doesn't seem likely.
No, it doesn't. And normally when you hear of things like that could potentially be government technology or whatever, it has like a metallic appearance, usually very sleek looking, and usually glowing too, most often.
Typically, it's going to be more associated with the UFO phenomenon, not bringing up the questions of, was that a UFO or was that a witch entity?
Yeah. Seems pretty...
It's bizarre.
Pretty different.
Yeah. Now, I am more or less an agnostic, but like I've said before, this show makes me question a lot of things. So it's not making me religious by any means, but it's definitely makes me question, like, a lot of the Catholic interpretations of things, I think, are just that. It's a religious lens of a very real phenomena, and that to me is just as scary. I don't know if hell is real, but some version of it might be. That's
no kidding. And all the melding of sort of African voodoo traditions, this sort of Catholicism, and then the Mesoamerican.
Yeah.
It
So in the end, I believe in witches. Do you believe in witches?
I do believe in witches to a certain extent. It's so funny. Now I'm just thinking in my head, like, we were watching that Serpent and the Rainbow movie the other day, which we did discuss briefly, and we didn't actually get a chance to watch before our Mysteries of Voodoo episode 7 of Into the Portal. Right. But, or was it episode 8?
I think it was 7 or 8, yeah.
7 or 8. But in that movie, like, he is basically hallucinating a lot. And the video evidence would not point to a hallucination, obviously, but perhaps in other scenarios, what was perceived as a physical entity is actually hallucination. Where
a lot of
literally
it could be.
in that first scene of Serpent in the Rainbow, he's like cuddling with, like, what was it, a wolf
Like
or a jaguar?
or something,
Yeah, he's cuddling up with it. It's a physical object that he's like wrestling with on the ground, but there's nothing
just
there.
A hallucination.
Yeah, it's just him.
Well, for the ancient witchcraft, I feel like a lot of that could definitely be a part of that for sure. You're seeing something that's not there.
That brings to mind a whole other issue of visibility versus, like, you know what I mean? Like, how much we can actually perceive. We can't see radio waves. We can't see microwaves. You know what I mean? Like, what else could possibly change into our spectrum of visibility and then change out of it?
Yeah. Anyway, more rabbit holes for another day, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's like,
it goes on and on.
It goes on and on.
We hope you guys enjoyed this one.
Yes.
Thanks again, Adam, for...
very much.
that.
And let us know what you think. Do you believe that... What do you think these police officers experience, especially Leonardo's experience? Mm-hmm. And do you believe in witches? In whether it's in the...
Any sort of tradition.
Any tradition, any form. What are these things? What's going on here in central Mexico? Let us know. You can email us into the portal mailbox at gmail.com. We always love getting emails from people.
Yeah.
And then, come follow us on the socials at Into the Portal 1 on Twitter, at Into the Portal Podcast on Instagram if you guys don't already. Mm-hmm. And as
come
always...
join our forum.
Yeah, come join the forum on Facebook. So, just add Into the Portal Podcast. Forum group is there. You can click on it.
We have a page and a group. But go into the forum because that's more fun, more interactive.
Yes.
We post more on there.
Definitely. And if you haven't already, go check us out on Patreon. It's just patreon.com//into the portal. And we've got some really sweet stuff up there and a relatively recent bonus app. And there'll be more to come. So
we've got a really fun one planned for this month. It's
definitely
freaky.
Yeah.
And again, shout out Ian. Have an awesome birthday.
Yeah, man. Very, very happy birthday to you. And once again, thank you for listening to this little prelude to the spooky month of October and The Witch.
Yes.
We'll be back next week.
Until next time.
This was a podcast from the Podfix Network. You can check out more shows like it at podfixnetwork.com.